Welcome to City Hall. We'll get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Father John Salem was with St. Elijah Antiochian Orthodox Christian Church. I'll ask him to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilwoman Meg Salyer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask you to stand, but you're already standing.
Let us pray. Lord, have mercy. O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, the God of all mercies and compassions, whose mercy cannot be measured, whose love for man is an unfathomable deep. As unprofitable servants falling down with fear and trembling before thy majesty, we humbly bearing thanksgiving unto thy deep compassion for the benefits bestowed upon our land and our city. We glorify, praise him, and magnify thee as benefactor. And again falling down in thanksgiving for thine unmeasurable and ineffable loving kindness, we humbly pray that thou grant our leaders of this city prosperity of Moses, the courage of David, the wisdom of Solomon, delivering our city, its people, from every circumstance that is not good, and granting unto them peace, tranquility. Count them worthy always to offer thanksgiving, to tell of thy most gracious benefits, and to sing unto thee, together with the Father who is without beginning, thy most holy, good, and life-giving Spirit, always, now, and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, as many of you know, our city recently lost one of its most longest and passionate supporters. Ray Ackerman passed away, and the council and I have prepared a resolution to remember Ray, and we've asked his family to come down, and Susie Fuller is here. Susie, you want to come on up? We have a resolution. I'll ask the clerk to read it as we get settled.
Whereas Ray Ackerman was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on August 7th, 1922, and moved to Oklahoma City in 1947 after 5 years in the U.S. Navy with last duty as a fight pilot. Whereas Ray served 35 years of active and reserve duty in the U.S. Naval Reserve, became a Rear Admiral, and served as National President of the Naval Reserve Association. Whereas, following 5 years as an advertising salesman with the Daily Oklahoman while earning a degree at night at Oklahoma City University, he joined the small staff at the George W. Knox Advertising Agency. Ray bought the agency from Mr. Knox in 1954, and Ackerman McQueen is now the largest agency headquartered in Oklahoma, with offices in Tulsa, Dallas, Washington, D.C., and Colorado Springs. It is one of the largest agencies in the United States. Whereas Ray's many years of public service in Oklahoma City included work with dozens of charities and organizations, he made the most mark on the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, the United Way of Central Oklahoma, and the National Finals Rodeo. And in 2004, the United Way of Central Oklahoma established the Ray Ackerman Leadership Award to be given annually for outstanding leadership. Whereas Ray was a leading voice for the development of the North Canadian River, now known as the Oklahoma River, home to the Boathouse District, a U.S. Olympic training site for canoe and kayaking, and widely considered the finest venue of its kind in the United States. Whereas on April 20th, 2012, a statue of Ray in Regatta Park was dedicated to him as Old Man River and the visionary of the Oklahoma River and the Bricktown Canal. Whereas Ray married Lucille Frances Flanagan of Oklahoma City in 1948, and the couple have 6 living children, 11 grandchildren, and a great-grandson. Whereas Ray Ackerman died peacefully in the early morning hours of October 17, 2012. Now therefore be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of Oklahoma City that they do hereby extend their deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Ray Ackerman.
Let's show our appreciation. official, Ray would understand if we can get a motion in a second, we'll vote. Cast your votes, and the resolution passes unanimously. And Susie, your father gave his life's work to the betterment of Oklahoma City, and we see his work throughout the city when you walk around.
That's true. Thank you, Mayor. And I would like to thank all the city council and everybody here for recognizing him and honoring him. I know he's smiling down from above. And I'll just say one little thing. You all know, obviously, after this proclamation was read, that he was Oklahoma City's biggest champion. But he also understood that our city's greatest resource was its people. And I don't know in my adult life if a week has gone by without somebody stopping me to tell me a personal story about how Dad helped them get a job or get elected to office or reminded them why it was important to go to church. And so that's been the biggest thrill, is to hear all those little stories. Those are the things that didn't come out in the paper and, were not read publicly anywhere. And one more little story. I remember sitting in his hospital room, and I don't know, it was recovering from some surgery, and Tom McDaniel at the time was the president of OCU, and they were talking, and Tom had just told my dad that they weren't going to have a tennis program anymore. And Dad was saying, Tom, you got to adopt a rowing program. It's going to be big. And of course, I'm sitting over there going, rowing? So anyway, I can tell you firsthand he was a visionary. I believe a lot more than I used to. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Let's show our appreciation.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. I knew Ray from working with him on several different civic projects over the years, and Rotary Club, and he was a consummate gentleman. I never heard him say anything mean about anybody or mean to anybody. At the same time, when Ray told you something to be a fact, it was indeed a fact. You could go to the bank with it. And I just think he was a real addition to Oklahoma City. And everywhere you look in Oklahoma City, everything that goes on here has Ray's touch on it somewhere. So thank you very much.
If I could, Susie, this time of year is one that's incredibly special and always reminds me of your dad. He was such a passionate Salvation Army bell ringer. And he used to lead that committee for the Rotary Club every year, and he would get up at the podium on a Tuesday at lunch with his Christmas sweater, his Santa hat, Gary's smiling because he's seen this so many times, and his boom box. And he would start playing Christmas music and get us all out there to ring. And I did it last Friday, and it was in my heart while we were out there. He's just such a special guy. Thank you.
Mayor, there's so many stories about Ray, but I just, once he met you, he was a friend for life. I don't know that I ever walked into a room that Ray was in. He did make a point at some point about coming over and saying hi and asking how you were doing. And he was always the loudest singer of the national anthem at Rotary. You could always tell when Ray was there because, of course, he was a great advocate for the United States anyway. But you could always tell when he was in the audience singing. He was very vocal, but he was a great part. And his past, whatever he was passionate about, you were going to hear about it. You were going to get the full details of all of it before you left. So he was a great advocate for Oklahoma City.
Well, as Segway would have its good fortune, Ray's Rotary Club also helps us determine and honor the Public School Teacher of the Month. And Daniel Buckmaster is here. Daniel, come on up. Daniel is a science teacher at Belle Isle, and we have a resolution. Let's take a look to read it.
Whereas Daniel Buckmaster has been named Teacher of the Month by the Foundation for Oklahoma City Public Schools and Rotary Club of Oklahoma City for December 2012. Whereas Daniel Buckmaster teaches 6th grade science at Belle Isle Enterprise Middle School and has served Oklahoma City public school students for 8 years. Daniel has been honored as the Belle Isle Enterprise Middle School Building Teacher of the Year in the 2012 to 2013 Oklahoma City Public School District Teacher of the Year. Daniel is a National Board Certified Teacher and was a finalist for the 2013 Oklahoma Teacher of the Year. Whereas Daniel Buckmaster encourages his students to engage in creative problem solving, and whereas Daniel Buckmaster shows outstanding compassion for his students and encourages other teachers to do the same. Daniel Buckmaster is an exceptional example of a lifelong learner and has been an outstanding representative for Oklahoma City public school teachers. Now therefore be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of Oklahoma City that they do hereby recognize and commend Daniel Buckmaster on his selection as December 2012 Teacher of the Month by the Foundation for the Oklahoma City Public Schools and the Rotary Club of Oklahoma City.
Let's show our appreciation. And we need a motion and a second. Cast your votes. How about that? It's unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the mayor and the council for this resolution. I'd like to thank my school's councilman, Ed Shannon. I'd like to thank the Rotary Club and Oklahoma City Public Schools, as well as my principal in my school at Belle Isle, Mrs. Lynn Keller. I'd just like to say really quick that I love this city. I love Oklahoma City. I love living here. I love working here, and it's because of the vision and the work of people in this room and people that have put their time and effort in this city. All I've ever wanted to do was just make school a better place for kids, and I've been able to do that, but I wasn't able to do that alone. And it took a whole group, the community, the parents, the staff, and everyone together. And so I just want to thank you for your continued support for our schools, our students, our teachers, and for the future of Oklahoma City. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Daniel, I'll just point out, Daniel lives in Los Rosas in South Oklahoma City, works at Belle Isle in North Oklahoma City, and spends Wednesdays and Sundays as a youth minister in Noble, his hometown. Congratulations, community's office.
Mayor, while you're heading up, I just wanted to say, we have many, many, many fine teachers in the Oklahoma City Public School District, and to be Teacher of the Year in the district is really a major accomplishment. And Daniel, I've had the opportunity to hear you speak before and appreciate everything you're doing. Hope you enjoy lunch today. I hope I'll be able to see you along with Councilman Morris at Rotary today. But thank you for all the work you do for our children.
We are still under office of the mayor, and we are fortunate today to have the state school superintendent with us, Janet Parisi. Janet, would you come forward? I will say off the cuff that Janet is making some incredible, nice changes to the education level of our school system throughout the state, and she has recently undergone a new strategy of applying letter grades to schools to kind of give the public and the paying citizens an idea of the performance levels. And the council has asked Superintendent Parisi to come here and give us more information about the grading system. So welcome to City Hall.
Well, Mayor, thank you very much for inviting me here, and to Councilwoman Salyer, who first brought this up to me, and it is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you today. As most of you know very well, Oklahoma City is my city. I have been a resident of Oklahoma City since I was 9, and no, I won't tell you how many years ago that was, but it is a city in which I have grown up. I have gone to school, I have worked, and have raised my family, and it is one that it holds a very special place in my heart. And through the years, I have, with great enjoyment, seen the growth of this city and the prosperity of this city, and I can tell you it's very, very exciting. It is indeed, as I said, a pleasure to be here with you today and discuss one of the major reforms that this state is undertaking, and one that will be a tool, we hope, for every citizen across Oklahoma and in Oklahoma City to begin to get a deeper view of the activities of their particular school district. This reform is out of the suite of reforms passed by the Oklahoma legislature in 2011. There were many things that they passed at that particular time, and this is one of the most important things along that line. You know, in order to reform schools, we need to fulfill 4 major objectives, the most important of which is to assure that we have an effective teacher in every classroom and an effective principal in every single building. And that's why it's especially pleasing for me to be here with Daniel Buckmaster, one of our 12 finalists for State Teacher of the Year. And he is a great example of that objective, is to get great teachers into each and every classroom. We must have rigorous standards, and we must have rigorous curriculum to teach these students, hold them to high standards, high expectations for success, and give them the curriculum and the standards that they need. Digital learning is becoming more and more a very critical part as a third component of learning. It will engage students, it'll widen their opportunities and their ability to access additional courses. But also a fourth and very important objective is accountability and transparency. We simply must have information on how our schools are performing. We must be able to become part of the conversation around that. And indeed, since we have issued the A through F grade card, it has done just that. It has stimulated conversation across the state. And that conversation is very positive. How can, the questions have been asked, how can I be a part of the improvement of my school district? All of us love our city. All of us want our communities to prosper. And this is providing information for that. The grade card is based into several major sections, and by going on our website, you can pull down a grade card for any school site, any school district across the state. And you will find that it includes performance around, first of all, how students are performing on tests in English and in mathematics, in science, and in social studies. Then you will see how students perform and how they grow over a school year, how the whole school grows over this whole school year, from the year before to the following year, how they are doing in the area of English and in mathematics in terms of growth. And then we want to be able to focus on those students that are the lowest performing students, the lowest quartile of performing students. It is important we focus on those students and making sure that they are continuing to grow as well. And so you will be seeing then growth of students that are in the lowest quartile. That really has generated conversation and has allowed school districts and patrons within school districts to understand that we must shine a bright light. It is important we close gaps, particularly for low-performing students and students that are in all different types of demographic groups across the state. Then the final section is what we call whole school performance. And that is such things as attendance records, graduation rates, the rate at which students are taking advanced courses. Their parent participation is a big component of this. So as you can see in this grade card, all of these different components will then roll up into one overall grade. Now, this will allow parents and all stakeholders, when they pull up a grade card for either a school district or for a particular school, they will be able to either get an overall view or dive down into the information. Perhaps if a parent wants to take their child to a particular school and move into a neighborhood in Oklahoma City, and their particular concern is their child's reading ability, they can go in and access that information, which will cause them then to ask very meaningful and targeted questions of the principal as they go in and interview the principal to enroll their child in that school. Or if they're presently a patron of that school, to ask questions about how they can work together to raise the grade, to continue the excellence in that school, or to be a part of the improvements in that school. And so for that, my department has developed a brochure. It's called Raise the Grade Together. Because indeed, if we are to be sure that every child in the state of Oklahoma is college, career, and citizen ready, we must focus on continual improvement of their schools. So this brochure talks about ways that we as citizens and as parents and as stakeholders can be a part of improving the governance of schools, of being a part of writing plans for improvement, how we can continue to monitor the activities of the school district, how we can continue forward-looking planning in the area of finance and assure that resources, precious resources, are directed appropriately. And so that is for all citizens, and for parents, we have a special little insert into this brochure that is targeted at parents at being a part of the answer for this school. We think, as I said, the amount of activity, the amount of conversation throughout the state has been gratifying, and it is one that we think will lead to very positive results for school districts. We're already seeing some of that. I have some superintendents that are saying, you know, this particular school got a grade of D, and that we're not settling for that. Here are the things that we're focused on in improving the school. They are forming community advisory boards and asking parents and stakeholders to be a part of the answer for that school. A lot of planning, a lot of work is going into constant school improvement, and we think that is absolutely critical. This is something that is new. Prior to this, the accountability system for this state was something called an API score, which was simply a number that was created that really kind of lacked meaning. It lacked reference for individuals on what that really meant relative to school behavior. We believe the Oklahoma School Grade Card will provide additional information and deeper information to citizens. So with that brief overview, I want to respect the council's time. I'd be happy to answer questions from any council members concerning this or any other reform that we are undertaking in the state.
Yeah, Pat?
Just a quick question. Excuse me. Thank you very much for coming here, and congratulations on your efforts to make the school's performance more transparent. Initially, the paper reported that several superintendents were unhappy with the system. Have they, by and large, bought into the results?
I'm sorry, they're by and large
bought into the result, bought into the program?
I think anytime you put forward something this new, it's going to get a lot of questions, and there will be objections. We made a great deal of effort to get a great deal of input from educators from across the state. Of course, we had public hearings on this. We had periods of public comment, private conversations, and consultations with superintendents across the state. This is new, and it provides complete transparency and accountability. I think when you get into that, you're going to have a few people that are going to be unhappy about it, but by and large, I think superintendents are becoming pleased with the reaction of their patrons towards this grade card. We're not seeing any finger pointing, I think, is one of their concerns. It is, wait a minute, how can I be part of the answer to improve my school? I love my school. I love our teachers in our school. How can we work to continually improve our school?
Mayor.
Yeah, Skip?
The new concept, were the schools given an opportunity to operate in some trial and error program before this overall program was just dumped on all the schools throughout the state of Oklahoma?
Well, Mr. Kelly, we had for many, many, many years had an accountability system called an Academic Performance Index, which was a number index. And that was a simple number that was an amalgamation, if you will, of multiple metrics. The metrics that went into this grade card are the exact same metrics that went into the API score. They're just broken out and they're presented in a different format. And so those metrics that districts had been working on were always there. We wanted to provide more meaning to citizens, more relativity to citizens, so they could understand what these metrics were. And so we converted those metrics from the API score, roughly, if you will, and if you want to compare them to this grade card, actually we ran those and showed that they were very comparable to this grade card. But simply now the transparency is there. So quite frankly, Oklahoma has had this for a lot of many years, a couple decades, or decade at least that I know of, and this is simply transferring these metrics into a more meaningful format.
But we never heard of schools receiving Fs, Ds, and Cs. And my point is that is it really fair to grade all schools with a concept like this the same way? Because I personally, and we talked last night, I'm personally aware. This is not some statistical information that's been received by me based upon my experience, based upon my direct hands-on day-to-day contact with people in my community and who have children that go to school, and teachers who are teaching children that have no parents in the home, literally have no parents in the home. And so this concept about parents becomes a weakling in a lot of communities, because a lot of these children get up in the morning by the grace of God, and they make it to school by the grace of God. And they have teachers who, because of their love, care, and sincerity about the welfare of these children, have layers and layers and layers and layers that they have to remove before these children are able to be taught. But they do that. This program don't grade that. And it just, I think it makes more of a challenge to the people who are trying so hard to make a delivery of quality and a quality of life for so many of these children. If you take some of the schools in my district, and you take some of the schools in some of these rural areas, it's amazing what the teachers do for these children every morning. Some of these children don't see a meal the night before they went to bed. The first nutrition they get is the morning of at the school. Sometimes the first smile that they see is that teacher, that principal that's standing at the door waiting on them. The first hug that they get is right there. But you don't see that in this type of matrix. And I just think it's kind of unfair, and I'm not just talking out of the, because something I heard. I've represented grandparents, children. I've represented parents' children. I've represented relatives of these children, and I've represented some of the children. I know that these type of programs causes a lot of heartache for principals, for teachers, and in some of the schools that's already challenged. This is just, it's an added block for them, because now they have to answer to this higher hierarchy of whether or not we are mastering at your level, as opposed to who's coming in and watching us and see us, what we do every day for little Johnny, Mary, Sue. And it just, we keep talking about it takes a village to raise the children. Well, so many of the villages have been raped, and everything in the village is gone. And sometimes the only thing that's standing in the village is when the children see the teacher and the principal there at the school. All the other resources in the community is vanished. That's why, I think some of the problems that you have, as we were talking last night, I think this is a good example of, you put everybody in the same basket, and we say that education is going to be the same for everyone. We grade every school on the basis that every child is supposed to graduate and be ready to go to college, and we know that's not true. All these children are not going to, all these children don't have the aspirations of going to college. But we put the burden on the teacher to think under these type of programs that every child that walks into a high school, that this is going to be a college-ready child. And it's not true. If it was true, then why would we have so many VOTECs? You know, and I just think that, in my personal opinion, I think we've gone overboard of putting too much pressure on so many of the programs that are already working that, I mean, are measurable. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and if I could comment with you, this grade card is not meant to be the be-all, end-all overview of a school. It is simply to be a tool that others use against, as I say, the prism of what they look through and evaluate their schools. So I have had parents come to me and said, well, as far as I'm concerned, my child's going to an A school. My child is excelling. My child is with a great teacher. And this is one where I'll continue to improve the school overall, but I believe in what my school. But let me also say this, Mr. Kelly. I did my practice teaching at Scheidler Elementary. I saw the winter coat program that was donated to these children by an anonymous donor. I packed the backpacks with food for the weekend for these children. We made sure that every child had breakfast every day, had lunch, and stayed after as long as we could keep them to give them their snack for the evening. There was summer food programs for these kids. I saw the effect of poverty on these children. I saw the cardboard homes that they lived in down by the river. I experienced that. Sadly enough, I'm seeing a different kind of a poverty in rural Oklahoma, but one that is just as profound and just as oppressive. Mr. Kelly, I ran for this office because I believe that the only true way out of poverty is through an education. And sir, indeed, for these children to meet the challenges of the 21st century, we would not be meeting our obligation unless we got them ready for those challenges. There are more honor students in the country of India than there are total number of children in the United States of America. The requirements of the 21st century on all of our children is one to where if we do not have high expectations for their performance, if we don't have the highest expectation, the very children you and I were talking about last night will be nothing but further and further behind. I appreciate your comments, and I understand the burden this puts upon their educators, but I also understand they already knew that burden before they were told a grade. And it is one that I will tell you that the remainder of time that I am honored to be in this position, I will work tirelessly every day for all children in the state, but I will tell you, always in my heart are the children of Oklahoma City.
Meg?
Janet, Dr. Breese, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity, and my goal has already been met. In Ward 6, within 3 blocks of each other, I have 2 schools, one of which received an A grade and one of which received an F. And so part of my need was to try to understand what those metrics were and what the areas are. So my F school won't be a surprise, and it was Emerson. And so as we talk about things like a whole school and parental involvement and graduation rates and attendance, that's an institution or a school that has a lot of trouble meeting those things, as do they year-to-year performance, because many of those students come in and out of that school and aren't there to be measured. So I appreciate your kind of walking us through what those things mean, and we hope, as you say, this will give us a roadmap to figure out how we can help and improve each one of those individual schools.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, David?
Dr. Breese, thank you for joining us this morning. I thought your comments, especially focusing or a major emphasis on the lower 25% performing students, is an important concept. Often, I think, many times those students that fall into that category, as Councilman Kelly has mentioned, come from an environment that makes it difficult for them to perform well in school. Are there programs that you see on the horizon, whether they're more in-depth after-school type programs, to kind of supplement the fact that they may not be receiving the support at home or in an environment that's conducive to improving? And what kind of efforts can public school foundations do to provide funding to help those types of programs be more successful? I'm concerned at times, sometimes foundations and other organizations do a very good job of collecting the money, but putting it to proper use, I think, sometimes can be improved. Thank you.
I appreciate the question. There are many, many programs available, after-school programs within schools. There are federal grants, there are state grants, all are designed to focus on student performance and to be able to also focus on this lower 25 percentile of performing students. If you will, just very briefly, let me focus on one of the most important things we can do for our children. If a child can't read, they can't do anything else. And so we understand from research that a child's academic vocabulary by the end of first grade predicts success in the 12th grade. That has been well established. We also know that in order to bring a child in the first grade that is behind on their reading level, it requires 90 additional minutes every day focused on reading for that child to bring them up to grade level. However, if it is not addressed by the 4th grade, it takes 400 minutes to bring that child up to grade level. And in 4th grade, children stop learning to read and they start reading to learn. Absolutely critical. So if you move everything aside and you do nothing else, you must focus on reading and you must help teachers become more effective. Many strategies we're doing from the State Department, many strategies districts are undertaking. One of the things that we are doing from the State Department is supplying districts with reading coaches. They're called the REACH coaches. And this involves job-embedded training. In Oklahoma City and in the state, every single year, between 30 to 36% of third graders are failing the third grade reading test. This is an ominous sign because it predicts dropouts, predicts special education enrollment, predicts problems with drugs, alcohol, and violence. And so what we are doing is the REACH coaches are going out, and these numbers have been the same for 10 years, have not moved. And so we know that those children are learning how to read differently. It is not that they can't read, it's just that they must take a different route to reading. So these coaches are going out and training classroom teachers on alternative teaching methods in order to raise their reading level. We will soon be doing the same thing with mathematics as well throughout the state. And this is one that has been received well in Oklahoma City. We've gotten a great response on it, and the reading coaches are very energized and excited about their work in Oklahoma City. Right now we're focused on grades K through 3, but very soon we will be moving up into the middle school and the high school levels as we go along.
Yeah, Gary?
Just a quick question. I picked up on something you said earlier on. I want to make sure I have it right before I go out and repeat it anywhere. But you talked about for years there was an academic rating, a numerical rating that was...
Academic Performance Index.
Okay. Would it be fair to say a school that received a lower letter grade in your system here probably was receiving a lower index score in that kind of comparable to it over the years?
Correct. So if I told you that the school you were interested in had an API score of 1,100, what would that mean to you?
Right.
Not a whole lot. If I said it was out of 1,500, you might say, okay, I have some more information, but I'm not really sure what that means. If I said it was a grade of C, then it has meaning for you, and you understand a little bit more, and then you would want to look more into what brought them to that C average. And the grade card does that. It uses the exact same metrics that the Academic Performance Index had. It just puts it into a more meaningful format.
Larry?
Thank you for coming, Dr. DeRisi.
Thank you.
I had the privilege a number of years ago to serve on the National League of Cities Human Development Committee, and at that time, No Child Left Behind was a big mantra from a national standpoint. Is it safe to say there's some similarities between what it was trying to accomplish as far as accountability and evaluation and what our program here is trying to accomplish?
Yes, sir. No Child Left Behind, or always known in Washington, D.C. as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESEA, was an effort to bring forth better accountability so we can monitor how our schools are performing. There were many good things about that bill, but there were some things that actually hampered performance and progress in schools. So Oklahoma applied for a waiver under No Child Left Behind, not because we wanted to leave it, but because we wanted to make it more flexible, more usable, more applicable to Oklahoma's needs. And so, yes, it is very important that we have that accountability, that transparency, and we do whatever we can to bring others into this. Certainly, Oklahoma's received the waiver for 2 years. I'm privileged that I get to be in a small committee speaking to Secretary Duncan on Thursday afternoon to urge reauthorization of ESEA using some of the provisions that the waiver provided Oklahoma students and students in the 20-some-odd other states that received the waiver. Those have been working for 2 years, and we want to provide input into how ESEA can be better authorized. So, yes, it's an important reform. Accountability and transparency is always critical to being able to move forward.
And the goals of it from a very high level and the goals that we have here, you mentioned the statistics on the student achievement in India versus United States. Both, your effort is to get our students so they can compete effectively in the new world market that we're dealing with in this particular century. Is that it?
Oklahoma students are no longer in competition with Oklahoma students, nor are they in competition with Texas and Arkansas and Missouri. Oklahoma students are in competition with children all over the world. And they're already connected to kids all over the world. I can tell you that when I go into schools. It is one to where we must prepare our students to be able to go toe-to-toe against children from across the world. When you have a country like the United States that is currently ranked 12th in the world in mathematics and 16th in science, that puts us behind in our ability to compete meaningfully with other countries. Oklahoma is a part of that. Oklahoma holds so much promise. I will tell you, as I visit with my counterparts from other states, Oklahoma is positioned to take great advantage of these reforms, and with our economic environment and the way that this state is moving forward, we are positioned to really take a lead in these, in applying these reforms, but also in success for our students.
And that success for our students, and this is my final question, Mayor, if I could. I thought you mentioned that the goal was the success of the students, and it was not to get everybody into college, that it was to prepare them for life in the way that they thought they should go. Did I miss something?
No, you're exactly right. In order for students to be really prepared for the demands of the 21st century, college-ready and work-ready must mean the same thing, because that is the nature of work coming forward. The aerospace industry, as you know, is growing its position in the state of Oklahoma. And I had a member of the aerospace industry said, right now, I have job openings for high school graduates at $41,000 a year. Pretty good number for an 18-year-old. And I said, let's get you in. What do we need to do to get you up and going? He said, no. He said, they have to complete a college prep curriculum. And it's because the training we give them continually requires that academic skill level to continue to comprehend the complex technology that we're teaching them. Indeed, we're seeing more and more melding between Common Ed and our career tech system. Children are going into career tech programs and coming out with college hours in their hip pocket because they have industry certifications that they are attaining that have college hours connected to it. So those lines are becoming blurred. Indeed, as I said, Oklahoma's positioned to take advantage of those types of jobs. Most of them are in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it is one that we want to position. My focus is giving every student the opportunity to be in a position to take advantage of career opportunities such as that.
Thank you very much, because it kind of goes back to my fundamental principle. Train up a child in the way he should go, and you're trying to give him a fundamental beginning, especially in the reading area, and then they can seek the success in the profession or the trade that they feel is most suitable for them.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Ed?
I also want to thank you for coming. This has been very informative, and I think anytime the city and state can coordinate, we're better off. And so along those lines, I just wanted to explore with you ways that the city and state might be able to coordinate addressing our public health epidemics. As I'm sure you know, we have public health epidemics that are increasing at unsustainable rates. Our obesity rate is increasing more than 1% per year, 14% 20 years ago and 34% now, a diabetes rate that's tripling. And it has the potential to bring our economy to its knees, our healthcare system to our knees. And sometimes I feel like we debate about the Affordable Care Act and really we're just debating how we're going to circle the drain, because no healthcare paradigm is going to be able to withstand this kind of rate of acceleration. And as I look at, just as you were talking about how it takes so much more effort later to get reading up to par later in the game, then it seems like these public health battles are being won and lost in childhood. We know that now some 18% of 4-year-olds are obese. The rate from 2 to 5-year-olds has quintupled. And unfortunately, it seems like a life sentence if they are, the older they get and have a rate of obesity. So for 6-year-olds who are obese, about 50% of them will be obese through their lifetime. As they reach adolescence, it's some 70 to 80%. Well, just like the reading, will be obese throughout their lifetime. I'm wondering, and cities across the country are struggling, and they've come up with different, everybody's throwing something different. So some cities we all have safe routes to school programs, but some cities are trying to develop centralized kitchens in their cities that then distribute school healthy food to schools throughout the district or region. Healthy food zones where they limit the amount of fast food around a school, and on and on. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how we as a city, things we as a city might do, things the school, how can we address this epidemic?
You know, right now what comes to mind is two particular strategies. There are many things that we're doing. We're modifying meal plans for students that are served to them in our child nutrition programs. But of two strategies that I'm thinking of that are possible to enact right now is to assure that every Oklahoma City school is Healthiest Certified School. The Healthy and Fit Kids Coalition have parameters, very stiff parameters that schools are, this began first with businesses in Healthy Businesses Coalition, and now it is, I think, in its second or third year in schools. And they have special parameters that must be followed for that school to be declared a healthy and fit school by the Fit Kids Coalition. And it is one that obviously involves nutrition and nutritional education for students, physical activity, involvement in physical activity of all kinds for children, awareness of other health issues, awareness of problems with tobacco and with alcohol. It is one that is very good, it's very well done, and I think Mr. Hupfield is involved with it as well. I don't know if he's still involved with it, but he was very active about it and came and shared with me about that. Another initiative that is something that I'm seeing up in Tulsa, in the Tulsa areas, are community schools. Very, very effective up there. And those schools are part of the Union and Jinx and Tulsa school districts, and trying to remember, I think Broken Arrow might have some. And what they are is a school that the district looks at the need of the particular community and provides adjunct community services to those parents in combination with their county health department. So there are schools up there that actually have a small medical clinic inside the school that provide care for children that are ill that normally would not have the opportunity to get to a doctor. And they are seen by a doctor. They are triaged by a nurse, and they are seen by a doctor and receive care with the permission of the parent. There are, some of these community schools also have food banks within them that have a low-cost grocery store that parents can come to. Some of them have community gardens that the community comes together and grows healthy fruits and vegetables that are available to all. Some of them have counseling services for families in crisis and for drug and alcohol counseling, all types of services. And this is possible right now in Oklahoma City to help provide some of those services to make sure that the overall health of the student is assured and is assisted.
Is there a way that you track that? I mean, is that incorporated into this system, either physical activity, which for children seems even more important in establishing their metabolic rate than in adults, but do we have a way of tracking that and those initiatives that you talked about and incorporating it into this grading system to get a sense of how we're addressing public health in the schools?
You know, that's a very, very good suggestion, because as we're looking at how we can continue to make the A through F system even better, that is one that has been suggested, and it's something I think bears very thorough investigation. But how can we put numbers on that? So we're going to have to talk about how we can apply numbers to that to be able to produce a grade around that and to provide information to families around that area. And so I appreciate your suggestion.
Thank you. One final public health epidemic would be teenage pregnancy, and we rank 5th in the country, I believe. We've got 7,500 births, not pregnancies, but births to teenagers in Oklahoma every year, and some 100 births to children less than 14. TeenPregnancy.org estimates that the cost in terms of school dropout, mothers going to prison, welfare, poverty, on and on, is about $190 million economic impact to the state as a result of teenage delivery, not pregnancy, but delivery. And so I'm wondering, what can we do in terms of, or what is our policy, and how can we address this in terms of sexual education? I guess my understanding would be that the large majority of children don't receive any formal sexual education training. Would that be a fair statement? Or?
Sex education is a decision for individual school boards on how that will be taught within their schools. And while it does go on at many schools, there's no uniform state policy. That is a decision at the local level on what is to be taught and how that is to be handled to students. Also, if you dive deeper into the issue of teenage pregnancy, you will find several correlates that go along with the rate of pregnancy. I don't want to be beating the same drum, but with that is reading level. I know it sounds crazy, but if you have a poor reading level, as you get along in grades, you begin to think that you can't achieve lower self-esteem. If you do not have a supportive home environment or chaotic home environment, that creates several mental health issues within the young person. But we also know that an effective teacher in a classroom has been established as one that will not only raise the overall earning power for a young person, but it has a direct correlate between teenage pregnancy, drug abuse, and violence in teens. And so it's not just one thing. Just to counsel a young person against teenage pregnancies and against engaging in sexual activity, while we understand that as a component of it, we again, as you said, look at the overall health of the student and the education of the student. It's going to take multiple factors.
Just as reading has a correlation, do you believe that sexual education has a correlation in the effectiveness of abstinence programs and teenage pregnancy? Does sexual education in schools have a correlation with teenage pregnancy and teenage delivery rates?
You know, I'll tell you, I haven't looked at those numbers in the last couple of years. I remember just, if you look at that alone, you tend to not get the full view of what it does, because I haven't seen those big correlates in there. Because when you overlay that with culture, with poverty, it compounds the issue and it almost negates the education for these students. So it's something we'll need to take a look at, and certainly the Healthy Kids Coalition, I believe, is looking at that as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jen, one more comment. We had, many of us have been pushing for longer school days, longer school years. Where are we on that? Has there been any steps forward?
Yes, sir, Mayor. As I have proposed a FY14 budget that calls for a $234 million increase in aid to schools. Embedded within that, if we are able to get that number, is a proposal for 4 additional instructional days on the school calendar. We need 10. I'll begin with 4.
All right.
Oklahoma has the smallest amount of average school days in the country, and we need to bump that up.
We really appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Doctor, I would like to, first of all, I want to apologize about one comment I said in reference to the community being right, the village. My point is that, first of all, I think this is more than just the state superintendent's issue. I think this is an issue that municipalities, both local and the local school board, as it relates to the resources in a community. And when I said that the community in the village, where you have lack of food resources in reference to food deserts, as Dr. Shadid mentioned, you have lack of infrastructure in reference to recreational facilities for children after school. You have a lack of parents that are actually with the children in the community. And one of the things that you find that is probably the most profound and stable resource in the community, and especially in the African American community, and especially in Ward 7, is your faith-based community. And I think that when we look at these issues, many times we fail to realize that what we do here, when we don't advocate for better and quality retail establishments in reference to food resources as it relates to the food deserts that exist in so many parts of our city, then what are your children going to do when they want something to eat? They're going to go to the convenience store and they're going to buy a bunch of sugar. And every teacher in the world can tell you the negative impacts that have in a classroom over a period of time. And then, of course, the health consequences that we all ultimately wind up many times paying for. And so my point is that I think that it's more than just your office. It's the local school board that probably should have been here also in reference to these major concerns that exist on the local level. But that was my point, and that is that, you know, without having a total holistic approach from everyone that's involved in a city as it relates to the schools, it's never going to be what we want it to be. You know, I sit here and I listen to this, and, you know, I'm reminded of a story about Douglas High School and the first integrated football team game between Douglas and is it Capitol Hill? Mm-hmm. And here we are in 2012. That same school, Douglas High School, is making such an unfortunate news story as it relates to the quality of education today of students who are not and may not be able to graduate this coming spring. And it's just kind of a sad state of affairs to see that the history and the legacy and our educational system, long before this system was announced, that we still have problems that wasn't being properly addressed. And so...
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments.
Superintendent Barisi, thank you very much
Thank you.
for coming
Appreciate
down.
the opportunity.
We really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
We're still in the office of the mayor. I'll look for a motion on item 3, D, E, and F, a series of appointments. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. This time I want to move up an item that is a listed under items requiring separate votes. It has to do with opening night, and we are fortunate to have with us today members of the Arts Council. I see Peter DeLisi here. If you guys would come up and tell us what we can expect on New Year's Eve. And Peter, as you know, we need your name and address for the record, please, but we appreciate your presence today.
Peter DeLisi, it's 400 West California Street, Arts Council of Oklahoma City. Thank you all for letting us come before you this morning. As I got up this morning, it was 19 degrees outside, and 19 degrees reminds me of just one thing, and that's opening night, New Year's Eve. So we're here today to say thank you to the City of Oklahoma City on behalf of the board and the staff of the Arts Council of Oklahoma City for all you do to help us make opening night such a huge success for our city, for our community. Last year, ringing in the new year, we think we had around 70,000 people come into the Myriad Gardens, which was just kind of remarkable. Such a beautiful new park, such a great opportunity to bring our community together to celebrate ringing in the new year. And we're just so proud to be a part of that and to partner with you in that. I'd like to introduce Christina Foss, who's the director of opening night. She's going to tell you a little bit about the event.
Thank you very much for hearing us out today. The Arts Council of Oklahoma City presents opening night. This is our 27th year to be doing so. And the event is Monday, December 31st, starts at 7 p.m. and ends with our fireworks finale at midnight in the Myriad Gardens, like Peter said. This year we feature over 40 performances in 9 different venues across downtown Oklahoma City with 16 different stages. We rely on the support of 400 volunteers, 9 building managers and property managers, all of our sponsors, and then, of course, the City of Oklahoma City. Opening night would simply not happen with the support of the city. We work with the police department, the fire department, traffic, public works, parks and recreation, and so many others lend their time and expertise to make this event a success. We feel very fortunate and honored that we are able to put on this event for the community that furthers our mission at the Arts Council to bring the arts and the community together. So we just want to thank you so much for your time and support, and we hope to see you at the event. Peter passed around some programs and wristbands, so please come out to the event. We hope to see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your work. How many people did you say enjoyed last year's event?
Well, I think we had around 70,000.
70,000?
Yeah, they didn't all buy wristbands, Mike. But pretty much everywhere downtown kind of clears out and comes to celebrate the fireworks display. We have a great fireworks display, which this year we're going to have off of the 10th floor of the parking garage at the Devon building, and that's going to be wonderful. Actually, the garden wing in the Devon building is going to be one of our venues this year, and Edgar Cruz will be performing there.
And I think it's important to point out that this is a family-friendly event, and there
Absolutely.
are so many New Year's Eve events that are not family-friendly. Downtown Oklahoma City wants to make sure that this remains that way, and that kids are welcome and encouraged to come, just to give them a nap so they can stay up that late. But we appreciate all the volunteer work, and know people will go to the website and get more information and be down there on New Year's Eve.
Absolutely. Thank you all very, very much.
We do have a motion to...
Second.
Second. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, too. We're now on item 4 of the council agenda. It's the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item 4A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for December 4th, and item 4B approves the Journal of Council Proceedings for November 27th. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Mr. Mayor, outside of item 8AFD, which is a claim which is listed on the agenda for continuance until January 2nd, there are a couple of other items on page 13 under item 8B1, item C, 644 Southwest 45th Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has repaired. And then on to page 14 under item 8C1, item E, 1809 Wycliffe Avenue, we ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. And item R, 623 Southwest 49th Street, we ask that that be stricken. Again, the owner has secured.
Are there any other requests for uncontested continuances? All right, let's recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments on the MFA?
Your Honor, I have a question on B and C.
All right, B and C.
And the theory behind it is excellent. We're doing some engineering well in advance of the actual construction, but that is a rapidly developing area out there. I'm concerned about the fact that the engineering is going to be completed 2 years ahead of the construction, that there may be some changes in the interim that we'll have to have our engineering contract amended, and we either slow the engineering down or speed up the construction to get them closer together, I think. Just a comment, Your Honor.
All right. Meg?
Mayor, if I could comment on item A. This is some work and preliminary engineering that's being done for the streetscape and roadway improvements out at the fairgrounds. There is reference in the staff memo that they will coordinate plans and specs with the MAPS 3 projects that are happening out there, but I wanted to emphasize that and hope that we are coordinating carefully with the work that we'll be doing out there. And I guess secondly, hope that as this work is done, it will make it easier and clearer for people to access the fairgrounds. We have sort of a complicated issue. We've had a little bit of security issues out there, and most of the gates are closed. When there's not something going on at the fairgrounds, most of the gates are closed a lot of the time, and it is difficult for those of us that don't go out there on a regular basis to understand how to navigate. And so hopefully with this process, we'll be upgrading some of those entryways and making it easier for people to visit the fairgrounds.
That's one of the goals, is to accomplish that, so I'm sure we will.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Larry?
Yeah, item C, and I think Eric is in here. If you would, Eric, question on item C. If you would just give the viewers a brief overview of what this does. Public Works has done an excellent job this past summer working on bridges and roads out in southwestern Oklahoma City. We just got one shoot and chip done just before the cold spell came in to wind up our season, and I know our people out there are very, very excited about what's been done. And what can they anticipate in this item C?
As we look at item C, there's 2 bridge replacements. The first is on Cimarron Road. It's just a little bit south of 15th Street. There's a second bridge on Southwest 59th. It's just east of Cemetery Road. But these are 2007 bond issue projects. These are planned projects that were underway. They have come up on the priority list, and so we're now starting that design. So the engineer's been hired. We can expect work on both of those. The first is an estimated cost of about $350,000. The second is an estimated cost of about $250,000. So just as soon as those plans are complete, we'll replace those bridges that are in need of repair.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other comments or questions on the MFA? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OC MFA, convene the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. There are 3 items. All right. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. I'll note that Mark Allen is with us today, and Mark has been heading up the management team at the Oklahoma City Tennis Center. Vast improvement over what we've had in the past. Mark, thank you. We appreciate the public-private partnership that's taking place. Yeah. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. Just one item to pay the claims and the payroll. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. All right. Got a long consent docket today. It's like 25 items. Any comments or questions?
I'd like to just mention 6F, if I could, Mayor.
F, all right.
A question about V and W.
V and W. Okay. Meg, why don't you go ahead and get started with F?
Sure. This is a quick one, but this is a professional service agreement with one of our newest neighborhood revitalization areas, Uptown 23rd Street. And I want to recognize Jennifer Seals. She's here in the audience. Jennifer stepped up as the president of Uptown 23rd, and Councilman Shadid and I share 23rd Street. I have the South and some of the best restaurants, but Ed, you just have Granddad's Bar, which is new. So, this effort to restore the thriving commercial district on 23rd Street west of the Broadway extension has had several starts. I really want to recognize Michael Smith, who spent hours and hours and hours trying to gather business owners along the street, and for whatever reason, the timing wasn't quite right. And today, with Jennifer's leadership, but lots and lots of others, we just have a group of young people that are really excited about bringing this area back. And Cheevers was one of our early pioneers, but the restaurants, we've just opened a frozen yogurt place, and we're beginning to see a tremendous amount of activity. And so Kim Cooper Hart's area in the city is helping to provide some training and other resources to begin to try to connect these little commercial districts with the neighborhoods, and I think that's the greatest thing we're seeing. It's been so successful in the Plaza District, and we expect Uptown 23rd to be just as successful. So we appreciate the city's willingness to help.
All right. Thanks, Meg. Ed, item V.
If somebody can walk, there's a lot of players here, and it's been hard to follow at times. I know there's been reports in the media. If somebody can just walk me through.
I'd be happy to. The situation has to do with our public safety information systems, and there's multiple moving parts on that, much of which is in place and operational. ACS was our prime vendor on this. ACS, over the last couple of years, has been purchased by Xerox. And as we've gone through it, we've determined that it's probably better. They have procured sub-consultants that are doing different segments of it. And at this point in the program, it's better off to take ACS or Xerox out of the program and deal directly with the sub-consultants, the sub-providers on this at this stage of the game. And so there are two items today that are to deal with specifically Tyler Technologies, who's one of the sub-consultants for a component of this public safety program. There will be 2, 3, or 4 additional agreements related to some other vendors that will be on by the 18th. We're trying to get these closed out and get them out of the Xerox out of the process by the end of the year, since their agreement only runs through the end of the year. And we are progressing as the plan has been for several months.
The amendment and extension that we did in June, didn't we became the project manager basically in June? The city would become the project manager and deal with all the subcontractors? You know,
we've become more and more taking on that role over the last year plus. But yes, that was part of what happened in June.
Okay. So then this just formalizes that, or this?
This takes Xerox out of the equation and has these sub-vendors with their contract responsibilities directly to the city of Oklahoma City.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Comments or questions on the consent docket? Ready to vote? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. On to the concurrence docket. All right, we have a motion and a second on the concurrence. Any comments or questions? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We're on to item 8. These are items that require separate votes. We'll begin with a presentation from Rick Kane.
Rick Kane is here today to go over an ordinance today that we call the street furniture ordinance, and it has to do primarily with bus benches and bus shelters.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to share with you this morning. Just information about a new proposed ordinance that we're referring to as street furniture. This really replaces 2 ordinances that are currently on the books. One of them is specific to bus benches. The second ordinance is specific to bus shelters. And if I can get this to cooperate here. Sorry about that. As public transit director, I do want to go ahead, Marcia, if you'll advance it for me. I do want to thank you for your support, continued support of public transportation. It's been a council priority for a number of years. In this past year, this last summer, you did provide some additional funding for increasing our transit service by increasing frequency on 4 of our routes. While I had this chance this morning, I did want to share with you the information that we have seen double-digit ridership increases on every one of those 4 routes by increasing the frequency, from a low on one route of 10% to as high as 40% on one of the routes. So again, we continue to see, as we make investments in the transit system, particularly increasing the frequency, we see ridership gains. Secondly, I've talked to you before on previous occasions, and as late as September, about the enhancements we're trying to make to our system through technology advances. We are very close now to completing our real-time bus information installation on all of our vehicles. We had targeted to have this complete by the end of the year. Staff tells me that we anticipate that by the end of this week we'll actually have all of our buses equipped with the capability for real-time information. Now, we'll still have some tweaking to do on them because, as you would anticipate, and a technology as complex as this that doesn't always work real well the first time, but thus far, all of the vehicles where we have completed the installation, we've been able to work through those bugs. And so we're very excited about that capability of providing better route information to our bus passengers. So this morning, really, I'm here to talk about an ordinance that's also going to address another issue that's been of concern to us, and that is the issue of trying to provide a better environment for our bus passengers as they use our system and travel through our system. Now, this graphic that I've got here on the screen that you can see is not specific to what we're proposing, but rather kind of provides an opportunity to emphasize 3 focus areas that we want to accomplish by this new ordinance. The first one is accessibility. We're very concerned that we make it easy for people to get to the bus stop and then also to move away from the bus stop. Secondly is the amount of information. We want to enhance the amount of information that's made available to all the users of our system. And the third item that we are also focusing on is trying to provide some level of better protection from the elements when you're waiting for a bus, to at least give you something more than just an open exposure that you would have on benches. These next 2 slides, just to provide a quick a summary of where we are right now in terms of our system. This one speaks to a number of different transit shelters that we have throughout our system. One of the things that you will see here, if you just look at some of these pictures, is although they may have a concrete pad by the shelter, access to these shelters is somewhat inhibited if you have any kind of a mobility impairment. And if you go to the next slide, Marcia, thank you. This kind of really pinpoints the problems that we have with our existing system as it relates to bus benches. You can see that they provide absolutely no protection from the elements. Access to the shelters and egress from the shelters is difficult at best, particularly for anybody that has a mobility impairment. And as you can see, most of these have no information relative to when that next bus is coming by or any type of bus schedule. So what we're proposing in the new ordinance is to address a number of these focus areas. Number one, the design of the street furniture is still an evolving process, but under the old ordinance, the Public Works Director would approve the design. If you were a bus bench provider, then anybody could get into the bus bench business. We're proposing that the Public Works Director will obviously still be involved, since these will be located on street right-of-ways, but also the Transit Director will be also involved in approving the design of any of our street furniture. Number 2, we're talking about, and included in that, I almost missed this point, is the fact that we're talking about access as well. So it's not just the literal architectural design of the shelter or the street furniture. We're also talking about access to, and again, egress from, making it easy for everybody. Under the old ordinance, things like having electronic message displays were not possible. With the real-time bus information, we do anticipate putting out electronic messaging at some of the shelters so that people can look, just like you have at an airport when you go into an airport, to find out, is your flight on schedule and what gate to go to. We're going to have that signage that'll tell you when that next bus is coming by, so it makes the wait seem a little bit easier. Also talking about location. Previously, you've never really seen issues relative to the locating of bus stops, because the way that the ordinance worked is that when we would identify where we would like to put a bus stop, whether it be a bench or a shelter, we would make notice to the adjacent property owners and let them know what was going on. If they had any objections whatsoever to that stop being located there, they could register their complaint, and that would end the process. What we're proposing here in the new ordinance is that we will still make that notification to the adjacent property owners. We want to have an appeals process. We don't just willy-nilly identify locations. I mean, we think it's important for the public and their use of the public transit system to have convenient stops. And so what we're proposing in the new ordinance is that if an adjacent property owner has a problem, that they can register their complaint first with the transit director. That person will make a determination, and we're going to focus on really life safety issues, not just I don't like it there, so therefore take it away, but is there really a life safety issue that's concerned here? If the transit director makes a decision that that person is not happy with, that adjacent property owner, then obviously they also have a final court of appeal, and that is you, the city council, to listen and decide whether it is important to have a bus stop there or whether it is not. One of the things I also want to emphasize, there's been a lot of discussion about this, and that is the existing bus benches and the existing bus bench providers. Right now, bus benches are privately owned, and we have about 4 providers of bus benches. This new ordinance over time will effectively start to phase out bus benches because we're trying to improve that overall experience. But in no way does this eliminate our bus bench providers. They are grandfathered in this. Really, the only way that we eliminate a bus bench is either, one, we change the bus route and the bus bench is no longer on the route, or perhaps you may have a streetscape project that you're going to be undertaking, and as a result of that project, you decide that you want to have a different type of furniture located there. Or as we work to make our stops more ADA accessible, we also want to include an upgraded upgraded street furniture at that point in time. So those are some of the key things that are the differences between the old ordinances that existed and the new ordinance that we're proposing. Finally, and Dr. Shadid mentioned this some time ago at one of the council meetings, mentioned an item called Title VI. Title VI is a federal program that basically wants to ensure that we treat all users of our system fairly and equitably. COTPA has a Title VI plan that we submit to the Federal Transit Administration on a regular basis for their approval. And what that plan does is outline a number of service standards, and included in that service standard is something that deals with bus stops. And what's on the slide here in front of you are a number of criteria that we use when we're trying to evaluate what type of amenities do we put at a bus stop. And so as we talk through this street furniture process, what we do see is a hierarchy of stops evolving. Some stops that again, respond to these different criteria. If it's a highly active stop with a lot of activity both in passenger count or buses that go by, it may have a higher level of amenities there, which means it may be a more fully enclosed shelter. It may have electronic messaging as opposed to some other stops which may have either a paper schedule or a paper map of the route. We're looking at things like QR codes to be able to put at our stops so that you can scan those if you have the right instrument, or they could just be a text number so that you could text a message and get a response back in terms of when that next bus is coming by. So whether it's it's a discussion more in terms of the level of amenities that we have, and so you will see varying levels throughout the system, but again, they're all designed on some very specific criteria that we can defend and that the Federal Transit Administration supports. So with that, that's kind of my quick overview of the ordinance, and open to any questions that you might have.
Okay. Are there questions from the council?
Sure. I have several. I am thrilled to see this. I mean, long overdue, and I think it's a glaring deficiency in our system. I guess once we decided to do it, I am struck by the speed with which this has been put together. We did have a preliminary meeting with you privately and asked some questions, but the ordinance was put together, and
Can't you just tell me we've been working on this for 5 years? So
Really?
It's all relative. It's all relative.
It's all relative.
That's what Marcia told me. She'd been drafting the ordinance for 5 years. So.
Okay. Well, it moved quickly here at the end. There were some questions that I had. I guess I'll just trying to understand the definitions first. The administrator is the director of COPTA, or his or her designee.
Yes, if you, the very specific titles, I actually have 2 titles. I'm Director of Public Transportation and Parking as my city position, but as head of the Central Oklahoma Transportation Authority, my title is actually Administrator. And so to try to differentiate, we just use the Administrator title in the definitions, with the Director titles applying to the Public Works Director.
And then the director in this ordinance refers to the Public Works Director or his or her designee.
Correct.
So the way it works is that somebody applies for a revocable permit.
Actually, COPTA, or in this case, the administrator will be making that application for a revocable permit.
So you have to, I guess, do you have veto power? Do you approve it first?
No, what will happen is I will come forward. We will identify a location where we want to put street furniture. I will then come forward just like any other citizen and make application to the city for a revocable permit.
And then the Public Works Director has
the ability to decide whether to issue that permit or not. Now, if he were to choose not to issue that permit, I do have an appeals process to come and stand before City Council and press my case. You would make that final determination as to whether or not a street furniture should be put in that location.
So City Council could get involved if an application was denied. If an application is approved, City Council is really not involved.
That's correct.
Is there anything that precludes the city, if the city came up with funds and wanted to invest in shelters itself on a particular streetscape like you were alluding to, is there anything in here that would preclude us from making those kinds of investments?
No. What I would suggest that the short answer is no. Now, the longer answer is if the city chose to do something specific that doesn't preclude the possibility of going to our shelter provider and see if they're interested in providing that shelter. If they were to say no, they're not, obviously the city can move forward then at that point, but that's always an option that's available to the city. So if a design, whether it's a design type that's specific that you might have, I did not show examples of some of the shelters that we have. If you think of the shelter that sits in front of the Chesapeake Arena or the one that's over by the ballpark, they're a more grandiose shelter. Those are ones that actually the city did themselves as part of our original MAPS program. So that possibility always exists.
But does this obligate us to going to the private sector first, or can we just do it ourselves if we so choose?
No, we could certainly do it ourselves. We chose to.
So one thing that we talked about that I wanted is an audit of the private contractors now to understand what kind of advertising revenue is involved, what are the costs of this kind of system. Is that something that the private sector is willing to do before we approve this? Or?
Well, understand, under the existing ordinance, the bus benches themselves, there is no revenue that comes to the city on bus benches. That's purely a private enterprise. They own the bench, and whatever advertising revenue comes off that bench advertising, they keep. So there is no check on what's going on there. It's only the shelter right now that have advertising, where we have that situation where there is a splitting of advertising revenues, and there is, and this is done independent of the ordinance. This is through an agreement that COTPA has with the shelter vendor, and we would anticipate that we would continue with a separate agreement relative to any vendor, and that vendor's identified as one of those definitions in the program there, where we do have a sharing of revenues. We do have the capacity to go back and audit those records. Right now, when they share information in terms of the revenue that comes to us, they provide a worksheet of how they evolved, how they generated that number. And so we have the capacity to always go back and audit or check those numbers to be sure that we're being treated fairly.
But we never have. We've never asked for an audit, or we've never verified.
To my knowledge, we have not actually asked for an audit of their records. We have received their response from time to time. We've checked just individually for that particular quarter of payment, where we've gone back and just said, okay, show us how you did this calculation and show us where you've got it, but we've never done an annual audit of their
And what percent of the bus shelter advertising revenue goes to the city?
That is, it's a fixed amount right now on that advertising revenue. To give you the specific number, I've got to go back and check that.
So I've asked for it privately. I want to ask for it publicly. I'd like an audit of that revenue, of the economics of the bus shelter system as it was before, and so I can understand how to go forward. On the Title VI, again, I'm imagining that there would be tremendous economic pressures to put shelters where advertising would be, I'm imagining that there would be pressures to put advertising in higher socioeconomic areas than in lower socioeconomic areas. Do you think that's a fair market assessment?
I think it's easily understood that certain areas of the city may have a better chance of selling advertising than perhaps other areas of the city, other locations where we might have bus stops, and that's specifically one of the reasons why we do have a Title VI program and how we monitor that. When we establish shelters right now, we have some very specific criteria, and many of the categories that you see on the slide that's still in front of you deal with that if you're going to get a shelter as opposed to something lesser, in terms of coverage or amenities, it's based on some very specific criteria that the FTA then understands, so that if we were ever challenged relative to why did you put it in one location, or why did we tend to see a proliferation of shelters in one location rather than somewhere else, we have the ability to define in very specific terms why we would do those locations in that way. So we're very sensitive to that, and again, the whole idea is to share this in a fair and equitable fashion so that we're not showing any favoritism over one area of the city versus another, or certain routes over other people who ride routes.
And I want to be clear, I know that you're very sensitive to it. I mean, we've talked about it over and over and over. I'm just thinking years or decades in the future when somebody else might be. But I know that you're very sensitive to it, and I appreciate that. I want to ask Kenny, just on, First Amendment grounds, it seems like we're trying to regulate what can and can't be advertised. No social advocacy message, and there's a definition here which is pretty broad. No social advocacy organization, religious message, which is pretty broad. Adult entertainment, which is very broad. How does that, you can regulate what the private sector is allowed to advertise?
Yes, this is since they're paying us revenue to do this, to put this advertising on there, essentially it's commercial. And we can decide what we want in our public right-of-way. This is I don't think there's a First Amendment violation here just because we're saying we don't want any political or social advocacy organizations advertised on these bus benches or shelters, or political or social advocacy or religious messages, etc. Adult entertainment is defined, and it's fairly narrow. And use of tobacco products, I believe we can regulate that. Because we don't have to allow anyone to put a bus bench in.
Like a spa? What's a massage parlor and what's a spa? Can a spa advertise?
This is a question that the attorneys have to answer, fortunately, not me.
And first of all, under the ordinance scheme, the administrator is going to decide whether or not he even wants to apply for the revocable permit at all. So he'll decide up front whether or not he wants a particular activity advertised there or not.
The COPTA director.
Yes.
So you're punting it back to him.
And adult entertainment, as you can see the definition of that, it basically this was taken from our zoning code on what adult entertainment is.
Okay, I'm going to move on from that. You said that non-accessory signs are not allowed in the downtown business development, downtown business district. What are non-accessory signs that are not allowed?
Well, this is defined as that area around the Murrah Memorial site. That's actually, we're carrying that over from something that was previously agreed as part of an earlier ordinance, so that there is no signage, any bus stop signage whatsoever around the memorial, from Harvey on the west to Robinson on the east, and then I believe it's 6th Street on the north and 4th on the south. So, and again, that is just carrying forward something that was already established. Actually, we expanded it just slightly, because previously you could be on the south side of 4th Street and put a sign, but you couldn't do it on the north side. We just said, let's take, and the same held true on 6th Street. And we just said, if you're not going to do it, don't do it on the street, period. Don't split the street in half. So,
electronic message displays, how does that work? How do you decide where they can and...
Well, from our standpoint, electronic message displays, and what I was talking to were those things that would identify in terms of next bus signalization, that sort of thing. Now, over time, when the original ordinance was done, and I think I had on there a footnote that the last time the ordinance had even been addressed were like 1990. So, I mean, it's been 20-some years. Electronic messaging wasn't even something that was thought of, and so now we're seeing that evolution to signage.
So when you say electronic message displays, you're talking about notification of the next bus?
I was talking about that, but conceivably, again, we're trying to be in compliance with the sign ordinance. Conceivably, as we have electronic messages signs that are just advertising signs, that potential exists.
Are you going to, there's nothing, I didn't see anything about setting aside a certain amount of space for route information, for putting maps of routes? Or?
No, and again, we didn't get specific in that detail, because that's going to be a function of the level of amenity we put at the stops. Some will simply have perhaps a route map or a schedule of when the bus typically comes by, where others may have a more grandiose spread for information. So that's going to be in large part a function of how much use that stop's getting and what it warrants.
Finally, the study that we're commissioning to study our bus system will address this issue, the bus shelter issue?
Yes, one of the, and you've mentioned that, you've asked that question before, and just for everybody else's benefit, this Friday the COPTA board will actually be approving the selection process for that consultant to be brought on to take a look at our transit system and evaluate its current condition, along with making some recommendations as to what we might do to make it even better. But part of what we're going to be asking them to do as they evaluate our routes is also to take a look at this amenity type package and suggest to us if they see things that they think would be improvement or something that we could incorporate to, again, enhance the riding experience of our patrons. So it's part of the process.
So would there be utility in waiting a couple of months to hear from them before we craft and pass this? Or
I don't see that they're going to be offering anything that's different in as much as we've identified what street furniture is and moving forward. They may suggest perhaps additional amenities that could be at stops, but the ordinance is not that specific that it speaks to those details. So we have that flexibility, I believe, to make enhancements if we choose to move in that direction, if we like their recommendations.
Thank you. Great.
I just have a couple.
Okay.
First, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the amount of attention that's being paid to the improvement of public transportation, and I know you're a big part of that, and I appreciate it, because it's contrary to Councilman Shadid's view that it's moved very quickly. I will tell you, as someone who's been here a while, it's moved very slowly from my standpoint. And I am so pleased to see the kind of progress we're making now. It's just really gratifying. The increases you spoke about earlier in the ridership on the routes that we've kind of taken a chance and put more money into. I think it proves something that I personally and Sam, when he was here, talked about a lot, that a better system will increase ridership. And I appreciate all the effort that you put into it personally.
Thank you.
The other question, based on this particular presentation today, has to do with there's one of these bus benches that's on this thing that I see every day, and it just drives me nuts to look at it. And what I wonder is have we ever looked at the possibility of engaging the property, the business that's located there? The one that you show at 74th and Santa Fe. I can't imagine how you got that picture, because there's nobody there in that picture. You must have been following the bus and just took it right after the bus left, because I rarely go by that location that there's not people standing there or sitting there. You also removed the cart that's usually there where people push their stuff out to get on the bus. But that thing, it seems to me, Walmart should be a willing player in that. That is either their employees or their customers or a combination of those that are using that. And there's a number of other places that I observed that I'm sure that the people that are using them are either customers or employees of the one at 59th and Walker. It's the same way. There's a Buy for Less there in some other stores. It's isolated, it's set out there on the corner. It ought to be moved to the north someplace where it wasn't so dangerous to be there. I wonder if we've put any energy into talking to the Buy for Less folks or the Walmart folks or whomever that benefits by these locations being close to them that way, to get them to participate.
Yeah, let me suggest there's a couple of things that we've done. Number one, and I think of the stops along Meridian Avenue, because that's a situation where we had to go to many of the adjacent property owners in order to make those ADA accessible. We had to get them to allow us, they actually granted us an easement so that we could create a sidewalk connection to our bus shelter. One of the pictures on the shelter group that was up there, it happened to be a green shelter. One of the three examples is actually something that's on Northwest 23rd Street. That is one of those partnership opportunities. You don't see a good angle on it, but actually there's a shopping cart corral that was there. This dates back to when Mr. Bowman was one of the council members, and this was an issue near and dear to his heart because, again, the location of a grocery store adjacent to the stop meant that we had a lot of grocery carts that ended up being there, and so we partnered. We came up with the money to create the corral, and the grocery store is now takes care of moving the shopping carts back. So that partnership opportunity that if it exists, we certainly want to exercise those as much as we possibly can. It also helps, take the burden off just the general maintenance that is necessary. So that whole adopt-a-stop concept, if I can use that terminology, those are some other opportunities that are there. So whether it's, again, in the Southwest 74th location that you spoke of, we've been working a long time. One of the things that has kind of drawn out this process is that definition of ADA accessibility and how do we get there. And one of the questions the attorneys had to deal with was, in order to make those sidewalk connections, how far do you actually have to extend that sidewalk? Do you literally have to take it to the corner intersections, or can you connect with driveways or parking lots and that sort of thing? And so, that's a situation where very likely we would have to go back to Walmart and say, can we perhaps need an easement from them in order to make those kinds of connections? So, again, back to your point, any place that we can get a cooperative partnership going, we're certainly going to try to do that.
Well, the one at 74th and Santa Fe, it's a difficult location. It's on a hill we talked about before. It's not an easy location. And especially to make it ADA accessible, it is going to be really something.
And we are working very aggressively with the city, both because they're doing, obviously, as you well know, a lot of sidewalk enhancements, whether it's through a GO bond opportunity or whether it's through a MAPS program. We now, COTPA, have actually been able to obtain some federal funding, and so we're partnering. We're bringing some federal money to the table to partner with the city in these sidewalk opportunities so that if a sidewalk is going in and it's on a street with a bus stop, that we can make that connection from the sidewalk to the stop. And so we'll continue to try to do that anywhere that we possibly can.
But that one is just really, it's highly used. It's on Route 40, which is, we all know what's happened on 40 since we enhanced it. I get to look at it 2 or 3 times a day, too. That raises the level.
You'll see some changes down
It
there.
might be easier to move your office.
I thought about that. And Rick has suggested a couple of times also.
Other comments? Yeah, Skip?
Rick, did I understand that the present contractors or vendors, as it relates to the street furniture, those individuals will be grandfathered in to the whole ordinance or to just parts of it?
No, they'll be grandfathered in the sense that their benches will stay at this point in time. Now, over time, since we're trying to move to a higher level of amenity, again, those bus benches may be removed. And so if I had 100 today, it's conceivable that a year from now I may only have 98 or 97, if either because, again, of a route change and the bench is no longer on a route, or because of just an enhancement in that area, be it a streetscape program or be it a, putting in sidewalks and making ADA accessibility. So should the council have particular projects that may necessitate benches being removed. But they will continue to have those benches until some event occurs that forces us to remove it.
Well, and I know one, I only know one of the owners of the street furniture, and I think they've done a great job. And I don't want to sound like that I'm trying to intrude on the free enterprise of individuals' business. But I think that, where I have identified some areas, it's about the bus stop itself. I have, and we have talked private about this, but I have referred an area that's on 36th Street between Phillips and Kelly. For some reason, nobody can figure out where it's at. And it's a bus stop that sits on a hill. There is absolutely no sidewalk, and then it's a danger zone to even get from the south side of the street over to the north side of the street where this bus stop sits. And if you had to stop at 36th and Kelly, at least there is a little bit of an easement where people could stand, or go all the way to 36th and Lincoln, where you have sidewalks, you have, a light, and it's a safer zone. I don't understand why we can't go out and look at some of these bus stops that it just don't fit for safety for individuals. This bus stop, this particular furniture, obviously needs to disappear. I had some people who called me out in Garden Days. I went out to Garden Days Sunday, drive around Garden Days, and some of the same issues. But you got one company has a bus stop on one corner, and the other one has a bus stop on the other corner. I'm going to say there's a bus stop just literally one corner apart. And it just, some of it just becomes cluttering in those areas. And if a person can't walk just from that one block to the bus stop, then we just might as well advertise front door service. There's several of them that are literally almost in somebody's yard, sitting on an incline, where you go to 23rd Street, one block, or 2 blocks to 23rd Street, which you have sidewalks, you have, a place to stop. But instead, they got the bus stops sitting right there, in these little small streets, and it just, to me, it just don't make, safety sense. And that's been my biggest complaint, is that the position of some of the bus stops themselves. So if nobody can figure out where Phillips on 36, the bus stop is between Phillips on the east side of Phillips, on the north side of 36, and so, there's been many of those bus stops, when you drive around northeast Oklahoma City, they just set on heels. I don't know whether or not the bus even stops there, but, it just seems kind of strange that, if it's just for advertisement, that's not a proper place to locate it, I don't think.
Okay.
I just want to clarify what Skip said. I mean, if we did a streetscape and we decide we want these kind of bus shelters and this is what we want the streetscape to look like, do we have the ability to remove bus benches, or
Yes.
those are all? We
Yes.
do.
No, the ordinance says that, yes.
So, okay, all right. So then let me just ask you about design, the design of the bus shelter. I mean, how is that decision-making? Is that just the COPTA director approves individually? Does the council have any say in what kind of bus shelters we want out there?
No, the ordinance speaks specifically to the administrator and the public works director approving designs of the street furniture. Now, I'm more than happy to share the concepts that will be coming forward in terms of that with any member of council to take a look at it, but it's not intended to be a council decision relative to do we like it, do we not, in the sense of a formal vote.
Okay, I mean, is what kind of bus shelters we have out there a policy decision, or would you consider that a policy decision?
Can be. I mean, council can do. It could be. The council could determine that's a policy decision and pull that back.
So we would have the ability to.
Well, I think you'd probably have to make an amendment. Would be my guess.
Well, probably not to this ordinance, would probably be to the agreement with the vendor. Would probably be the other thing that Rick's been doing as we've developed this is he's been working with planning. Aubrey and Russell are here, and we've been working with planning to make sure that the design district aspects of it is respected as we go forward, to make sure that we're getting to specific design districts that their criteria are respected.
Yeah, there is a specific statement in the ordinance that speaks to certificate of acceptance or approval, which is, and that does focus on the multiple design districts we have. I mean, not unexpectedly, when you look at the different design districts and the rules that have been set up for many of those, there's some conflicting rules, as we might say, as related to, as we were looking at our street furniture deal, but it's still the intent that we would go through that design district, a process, if we're going to be locating in one of those. Generally, that can be an administrative approval through the planning process, through the planning department, but again, we're going to follow the rules that everybody else has to follow.
My concern is, I mean, we went to a meeting, there was 100 people, and they almost uniformly did not like what the private sector was proposing as a bus shelter. And so how are the people, I mean, what input do they have into what kind of bus shelter, or what input does the city council have? And you've provided several options, and I'm just wondering if we can review those and define some parameters.
Well, is the agreement with the vendor in this resolution?
No, this is an ordinance, and this ordinance is general. There will be an agreement with the vendor that will be coming forth upon the adoption of the ordinance. It sets forth the criteria.
So it doesn't affect what we're doing here.
Okay. We can address it then.
Yeah.
You could address the design criteria in the vendor contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right. We'll let Rick go. All right, Rick, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Did we get a motion on this to introduce this item? All right. Second? All right, this item is being introduced today. There'll be a public hearing set for December 18th, and it's set for final adoption on January 2nd. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. On item 8B, this is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. We have 3 items listed. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8B? All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8C is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. We have one person that has signed up to speak. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak under any item listed under 8C? All right, this is a public hearing, and Katina McElroy?
Good morning.
Good morning. Katina, I will need your name and address for the record.
Katina McElroy, 1620 North 3rd Street.
Okay, and according to the note you handed up, the property you'd like to speak about is in Ward 6 at 1601 Northwest 8th Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilwoman Salyer can help you with this, I would assume.
I will do my best. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today? Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on here?
Yes, I would like to let my husband, Harry Burns Jr., speak for my behalf, please.
All righty.
Good morning, distinguished councilman.
Morning.
How are you? Yes, sir. I'm sorry for the dilapidation
Could
and
you
the
come
violation.
could you come right to the microphone, please?
Sorry.
And we do need your name and address.
Yes,
again.
my name is Harry Burns Jr., same address, 1620 Northwest 3rd, Apartment B. We're discussing 1601 Northwest 8th Street. The home you see in is Barry Switzer's youth home, which I purchased when I was 18 years old. What we've done as of yesterday, we've completely boarded up all the windows. I removed the tree structure touching the house you see on the east side so far, or the west side of the structure here. It's been removed. I have a guy currently come to cut it every day. Beginning yesterday, we've boarded up all the windows. I've removed the loose porch boarding there, and I'm prepared to put new covering there. All has been painted as approved by the members' designated structural boarding process. Also, all I'm lacking is the crawl space in two areas on the east side of the building, along the lower part there. That area, yes. And I plan to secure that today. That will be done this evening. But thus far, everything is completed. All holes have been boarded, except for the porch and that crawl space there. And I'm having the house lifted up here very, very soon. I already located and called someone yesterday. Any other questions or anything? Would you rather continuance, or I can bring back pictures? I have taken no pictures, but if you go by there now, you see I tell no lie. This work has been done.
What is your plan for the property, sir?
Well, my mother runs a boarding house business along this section of town. We stay 1 block behind the day center, 2 blocks away from the new drunk tank. Jesus House is 5 blocks away. Mission's not thus far. All the poor people of the neighborhood know of us, but we sustain them and help them to survive. We provide a way out of the hole or the gutter in which you see yourself. We give you a $1,350 bed to stay in order to gain access to a better future. So I will use this house to do that same process and continue on.
Charles, have you had an opportunity to go by and see if the work has been completed?
This is the last time we checked it, which would have been the middle part of last week. It's still in violation. I would request we leave it on, and when we check it, if it's boarded up, we'll clear the complaint.
Okay. So there's a process here by which we can remove the house from the list once we've certified that the work has been done. So
Yes.
My recommendation would be that let's leave it here. We'll have Charles go out. I hope you guys have been in communication, but Charles is here to help you.
I do apologize.
We understand, and this happens from time to time, but we're here to help. We're not here to create a problem, but we're also here to be sure that our neighborhoods are safe and in good condition. So
I fully agree.
my recommendation would be that we'll leave it on, but if you will go out, please, Charles, take a look at it, and if the work has been done, as we said, let's go ahead and clear it. And if further work needs to be done, I'd like you to communicate and let them know what needs to happen. Okay? Is that all right with you?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. Thank you for coming down today.
Thank you very much. You have a Merry Christmas and a nice day.
You too.
And that's Barry Switzer's childhood home? Is that?
Yes, sir. When I first purchased home, I was 18 years old. And all the neighbors, old people of the neighborhood came to visit the house. They wanted to see how you live. I had begun on the inside where I removed all the lead, and I took my time daily after work. Since then, I've had children. My first child was born when I was working on this home, and I'm diabetic. You can tell my structure. Every Thursday and Friday, I have surgery. The last 5 weeks, it's been that way. But everything's looking up and up, and it's getting better. And thank you for pushing me on. The post you see, I'm going to put 8-inch pedestals around. I'm going to make a fence that just truly to the city's laws. You know, I'll follow the ordinances. And it's going to look nicer. But since you've excelled me to that level, I'm ready to go ahead and go back to work on it. You see in my mother's house, up from Dayton, all the pedestals, gazebos, and all the carvings. I carved lion heads. I built the Ford Center. I worked at downtown Airport. I built tanks in Edmond. I'm quite distinguished. Langston University has a book I carved when I was 18 years old. It's not been defeated yet. And so it's still on display. It's the Alphamenta yearbook. They march around every year. It's what, 20 years? I don't know. Somewhere since then. But thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
I hope you're pleased with the work, and I will continue on.
Okay.
Hey, thank you.
All right, let's vote on item 8C. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8D has
Thank
already
you.
been passed. Item 8E, I understand we do need executive session?
Yes, sir.
All right, how about a motion to move item 8E to executive session? And a second. Cast your votes. That item moves. Item 8F is claims recommended for denial. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8F, claims recommended for denial? All right, how about a motion? And a second. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Looks like we're on to item 9. It's items from council. Pat, you want to get us started?
Nothing, Your Honor, thank you.
All right. Skip?
Yes. I would like to thank Craig Keefe for participating in a neighborhood meeting last Wednesday at Unity Baptist Church in far northeast Oklahoma City off of 63rd and Sooner. And this is probably the fifth time that Craig and I have met with the residents who were affected from the wildfires, as you all remember a couple of years ago, as it relates to some of the destruction in the area and some of the complaints in reference to the sources of water. But we have had everyone that's part of staff that could address, the issues and the concerns that they had. And so we met again, and but some of the concerns this time, I know that the policies have changed as it relates to private streets and what are streets that have been dedicated to the city. But one of the things that was kind of interesting, and I continue to get this presented to me, where streets were maintained years ago by either the city or the county, where the streets had a name, an Oklahoma City street sign. Once they were green, now they have been changed to white. Citizens call and make complaints in reference to the surface, the infrastructure, and their response is, well, it's a private road. Well, I can understand a lot of these people's complaints, and their frustration is that, well, when I first moved out here, somebody was maintaining the streets or was maintaining it. And I know that doing some research, we have found that, there were times, I guess, either the city actually maintained some of these areas or the county sent a crew out and was maintaining the areas. But when they decided that no one was going to maintain because of the status now that has been identified as private roads or private streets, no one got notice of it. So the citizens didn't get any type of notice saying that, we will no longer be maintaining this road because of our new policy that states that this was never a dedicated, a street or road to the city of Oklahoma City, and in order to do that, it has to be, brought up to standards and then dedicated to the city, which creates a financial assessment and which would require a water district plan for them to implement and be able, a street assessment plan for them to have these streets brought up to standards and then dedicated to the city. So I was just wanting to ask the city manager, and I think the concern is more real than we probably feel it sometimes. If it's possible that we could search for funds in some of these areas between the county and the city to create some upgrade in some of these areas as it relates to what was previously maintained by the city or previously maintained by the county. Some of it is really kind of a puzzle because people have identified, specifically certain individuals who actually worked for the county, whether they were supposed to or not. And then we know for a fact that there was times when the city was actually maintaining some of these areas. So it is a true concern. But Craig Keefe has been a real champion in helping me, and he has been to every last one of these meetings. And I mean, they are some very intense, questions, and the meetings and last for at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And so I want to thank him for all the dedication that he has given and he continues to give in reference to trying to find some answers and responding to the citizens, because he really didn't have to do it. And he has been to every last one of the meetings. And so, Craig, I want to thank you publicly and to whoever his supervisor is and to the city manager for having those type of individuals on our city team in reference to responding to citizens' concerns. Thank you.
Meg?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. I just would like to congratulate the Myriad Gardens Foundation. They had their first holiday market this weekend and had about 20 little tents set up with vendors. It was a partnership with the Myriad Gardens Foundation and part of Downtown in December, and I know that the vendors were delighted with the sales, so I hope it's something that we can continue on and make a holiday tradition. And I'd also, in the theme of education, like to thank Teach for America for inviting me to their Friday night event at the museum. We have over 100 Teach for America teachers here in our Oklahoma City Public Schools, helping to add creative learning opportunities, and just some awesome young people from all across the country. And so it was really a nice opportunity to thank them for what they're doing in our school system. It's a very nice event. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just thank you to the Sky Ranch Neighborhood Association for inviting me and Sergeant Brackeen out to the meeting last night, and I would encourage all neighborhood associations to contact the city council offices just to arrange either somebody from the council as well as from the police department. Whoops. I'm sorry, Francis. Just to encourage the various neighborhood associations to contact the city council offices to help arrange for someone from the city council to meet with them, as well as somebody from the Oklahoma City Police Department. We're always welcome to do that, and we enjoy that interaction that we get to have at those meetings. And then secondly, I'll ask for forgiveness in advance just in case it's inappropriate. I'd like to wish my wife a happy 60th birthday. Thank you.
Good job.
Nice job. Pete?
You could have got away with happy birthday. The number probably wasn't going to get you in trouble.
Gary, I kind of take that Mickey Mantle approach. If I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. So every year is a special year, in my opinion.
A couple things. One, with regard to the private road problem that Skip alluded to, that problem's been around a long time. When I first got on the council in the early 80s, county maintained lots and lots of roads. They did it because they had money, they had manpower, but it was illegal to do it. I mean, there's no question about whether it's legal or not. It is illegal to do it. What I found also was if the city was maintaining it, it was generally because somebody from the city worked or lived out there. I mean, lived in that neighborhood, and that's how that got done by the city.
That's a good policy, man.
Yeah, right.
Well, that is not a policy, not a good policy.
Thank you, Project 180.
The reason it's more problematic is because it's not a small problem. It's a big problem. There are roads all over the 620 square miles in this city. They're everywhere that have at one time or another been maintained probably illegally. There's probably not a better word to describe it than that. I've always wondered if there wouldn't be some way that we could somehow go back, though, and determine which one's road, and I think we can, because I've got a list that was generated some time ago, and perhaps offer some kind of an inducement for those people to bring that road to standard other than just offering them plan. I don't know whether that'd be legal to do that or not, but I think most of them would like to see the road brought to standard and maintained.
How many miles are we talking about here, do you think?
Hundreds, probably. Hundreds.
Okay.
I mean, I can take you to lots of them in my ward, lots and lots and lots of them. And I'm sure that if the word got out that we were going to look at some assistance plan, there'd be more pop up.
Yeah.
Because they maintain a lot of them. I mean, they count, especially in Oklahoma County, not so much in Cleveland County, but in Oklahoma County, there are lots of them. I've always thought perhaps it might be, if it could be done legally, some kind of an inducement to somehow participate in bringing the road to the standard, because the city's going to benefit from it. It's not like we would be totally without. It's going to be a better place for a garbage truck to drive down and a police officer and a fire truck and all that, so we'd have some benefit in it. I don't think we ought to be in a position where we start maintaining them again without some cost, or I don't think that's fair to people that paid to have the road, that paid for that when they bought their lot. But I do think there might be some middle ground there where we could do that, because it is kind of a shock to folks that had their road maintained. But most of that maintenance stuff has not gone on for 20 years. I mean, it's been 20 years since the ones that I know about in my area. The city has, nor the county has maintained them much in the last 20 years. I know there were a few real close to the county barn that's at I-240 in Anderson that were maintained, but when Commissioner Mon was elected, he looked into it and determined that there was no basis for doing it. So I think it's a problem, but it probably needs some study, both by legal and by Public Works, to determine whether or not we can fix it. The other thing, I regret not making this comment earlier when Secretary Barisi was here, but as I listened to what she had to say, I was struck by the fact that she gave an illustration of a high school kid that could make $41,000 a year if the teacher that was teaching them would have taught him more. The fact is the teacher's not making $41,000 a year in most cases. I mean, the base problem is we don't pay our teachers enough to attract the best and the brightest coming in. These Teach for America kids, they come in here and teach for a year for darn near nothing. They go back someplace else, and they're going to start at more money than the tenured teachers are. They don't have tenured teachers, but the 10, 15-year teachers are going to make in Oklahoma, and then we wonder why we're not getting the same result. We're not getting the same result because we won't invest the financial resources in paying teachers. You've got to have the best and brightest people doing it, or you're not going to get the result. And I really regret not saying that while she was here. But, given her some of her answers, I would have taken this 45 minutes to heard what she had to say to that. But that's an editorial comment I probably didn't need to make.
Larry? All right, Ed?
Just 2 requests for presentations. I thought that was informative having her here, and I appreciated it. As Jim Couch wisely points out, when we go to these national meetings, it always comes down to health care and education. So we've done the education. I wonder if we could have the Secretary of Health come, Terry Klein, come and talk about ways we might partner, because I think there's even more ways the city could partner with them, and maybe talk about preemption that's going to be coming up this year, and just hear
I'd like that. Okay. I will extend that invitation.
Thank you very much. The second is, if somebody could just for a few minutes explain before the end of the year, as people are dealing with taxes, if somebody, so much is bought online, unfortunately, but if somebody buys something online and they want to pay their use tax, how do they go about doing that? If somebody could just...
We'd be happy to bring something back.
Just just a short summary of how, if a citizen wanted to do that, how do they go about doing that?
I could think there's a line on your personal income statement. Fill it out and put the number in there. It's right on the 510 form from the state. It says how much you owe and plug it in.
But that would be a great thank you for bringing that up, Councilman, because that would be a great opportunity, even though some may know how to do it. It's a great educational opportunity for
about what the use tax is, when you should pay it, when you shouldn't pay it, and then how do you pay it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Gary? All right. And we have a presentation on the Parks Fishing Program. Wendell Wisenhunt is here and under City Manager reports.
Right. Wendell's here to talk to us a little bit about our fishing program.
While Ms. Tipton is setting up for the display, I'll just mention to you that what I'm going to speak to you about today is something that most of us give little thought to this time of year, but I can certainly tell you that a large number of my customers think it's the most important thing that my department does, absolutely. And I can assure you that the Game and Fish Commission agrees with those customers that it's the most important thing that we do. We have a great fisheries program in Oklahoma City, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why that is. We provide a very complete fisheries program here in Oklahoma City to our citizens through fish culture activities, fish management, and aquatic education. The fishing services that we offer out of our fish hatchery just north of the Lake Hefner Dam at 10,940 North Meridian provide fisheries programs well beyond any other city in our state, we feel. The building and the fish culture ponds that you see there are in great shape. Both the building and the fish culture ponds were renovated in 1998 with bond issue funds specifically for that purpose. Our stocking activities involve our fisheries biologists. We have the only the only municipal fisheries biologist in Oklahoma. That gentleman, Bob Martin, has 30 years experience, and we're very pleased to have him on board. He and we cooperate yearly with the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation for the stocking of our lakes. We stock more than 1 million very small fish in our fishing ponds and lakes each year. Those fish are furnished to us as fry that we raise in the culture ponds, and they're furnished to us by ODWC at no expense to the city. If we had to buy all those fry, we'd probably spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 each year. So we're very pleased to have that working relationship with the ODWC. The species that we stock in our ponds and lakes include hybrid sunfish. Hybrid sunfish grow larger than the typical sunfish that we all caught as children. Channel catfish, walleye, and striped bass. We manage more than 8,000 surface acres of fishable waters. I wanted to show you some indication of our success by mentioning 3 record catches that have happened in recent years in our 3 large lakes. The state record channel catfish was caught May 7, 2012 in Lake Overholser. That's a 26-pound channel catfish. That's a large channel catfish. The state record striped bass was caught at Lake Hefner August 15, 2010, in the upper right corner of your page, more than 14 pounds. And the state record walleye was caught in Lake Draper, a 7.4-pound fish. So not only are our customers catching fish, but they have the opportunity of catching lake records, state records. One must have both a state and a city fishing permit to fish in city waters. About 13,000 permits are sold each year. In the last fiscal year, that amounted to just over $133,000 in revenue from the sale of permits. Again, our fisheries biologist continues to work to improve the fishing in all of our city lakes. He performs surveys of catching. We call those creel surveys. He actually goes to the sites and visits with fishermen and ladies who are fishing and asks how they've done that day, and bases some of our successes or changes that we might want to make in our fisheries program on the catch that the citizen is making. He also creates fish habitat. Little fishes grow up to be big fishes if they can find places to hide, and we've furnished fish habitats in the lakes that allow them to do that. He also watches in these hot summers the dissolved oxygen rates in our fishing ponds so that we can predict any problems with oxygen or lack of in our fisheries as well. Partnerships make this program work. The partnership that we have with the Police Athletic League is very important to us. They help us with a lot of our youth classes. As I've mentioned before, ODWC is a very important partner, and we never forget the fact that the Water Trust allows us to stock the 3 major lakes and some ponds that are on Water Trust areas as well, so they're a great partner. And just the general volunteer help that we have through the years, more than 325 hours each year of partnerships through volunteer work. I want to mention the Close to Home fishing program that we have here in Oklahoma City. Close to Home fishing is a program that was developed by the State Wildlife Conservation Department, ODWC again. A few years ago, ODWC noticed that their license sales were decreasing rapidly, and they didn't need to think very long before it occurred to them that most of their licenses are sold in metro areas, and we're the biggest metro areas, so we're very important to ODWC. So the Close to Home Fisheries Program is a way that the ODWC can give extra emphasis to ponds and lakes in metro areas by giving us extra expertise in the fisheries sciences as well as additional fish to stock in them because they know that more people will buy a license and more people will fish if they can fish close to home. It's a simple matter. Those close to home fisheries that get that special emphasis include Crystal Lake, DeLisi Youth Park Pond, Edwards Park Fishing Lake, Kids Lake at Wilshire, Route 66 ponds, the Zoo Lake, South Lake ponds, the Stinchcomb Wildlife Reserve, Oklahoma River, and we are currently working with ODWC and the Game and Fish Commission toward a designation of Kitchens Lake as one of our upcoming close to home waters. Fishing classes, primarily for children, are a big part of our offering in our fisheries program. We have 9 clinics each year, primarily for children, that are in partnership with the PAL group, Police Athletic League. We serve upwards of 1,200 children each year in those 9 programs. We teach those children to fish, and they go away with a fishing pole so they can fish again after we've taught them how. Last year, we used Metrotech, Edwards Lake, DeLisi Lake, and Crystal Lake for our classes. We also have something that's rather unique in a metro area. We have a 2-month trout fishing program beginning in January at DeLisi Park, and ODWC each year receives a donation that allows them to buy the trout for the stocking in DeLisi Park Lake, and that's a very popular program. So what I've told you is that we have a good fisheries program that's working very well. We have a lot of people who think this is the most important thing that we do, and we're glad they feel that way because we think we're doing pretty well at it. It's a relatively inexpensive program, but one that makes a lot of people happy.
Okay, questions for Wendell?
Wendell.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the great and fine work that Councilwoman Willa Johnston did in reference as it related to the development of Edwards Park and the Close to Home fishing program there. And it has turned out to be a fantastic program, and it's heavily used. And so thank you for all the continued work that you all have done, and also the extending of the trails around the park and the lake. But the one major concern that has come to me on a repeated basis is the fact that, there's not enough trees close over around the lake. So
with all the kudos and everything, and I know I'm one of the ones that's sometimes bashing the trees of where they're planted, but can we get some trees? Come on, we can take some of the trees out of the center median downtown and take them over to Edwards.
Do you have in mind trees along the trail or trees along the shoreline?
The shoreline, you know.
Well, it's been so hot the last couple of summers.
Right.
That it's almost as if you wait for summer so you can go fishing, and then it's too hot to go fishing.
Right.
Yeah, so I understand the concern.
But thank you for your fine project over at Edwards.
It has been successful. We're pleased with it, too.
Any other questions for Wendell?
Thank you very much.
Wendell, thank you. Other city manager reports? All right, we have executive session. We'll be back.